Good evening, 49er faithful. We have a Friday night special going on here. The Hammerhead Show is in effect. I'm Rob Schuh. That's Jack Hammer. Welcome to the program. We love doing this every Friday. Man, how are you doing today, Jack?
I'm good. It's kind of like the last day of summer, right? Because we got training camp starting this week.
Yes.
Coming up on Wednesday, the first day of practices, and once that starts, there's not a lot of downtime between, for the rest of that. I'll get a little bit of a break when they go out to Minnesota because I won't be traveling with them for those practices. But so today was a good day. Got out to the lake, had a lot of fun running around. I don't know if you saw my picture on Twitter, but they basically have this setup that looks like very similar to Wipeout. Just an obstacle course with all these things. So I was out there bouncing around, making myself look like a complete fool as an old man, trying to do that, falling in the water. And then I got a really cool message to go on do a radio interview, which I've never done before. That was the first time for me with Larry Krueger and Damon Bruce at 95.7 The Game. So that was an awesome experience, and then get to end it with you, which is always fun. I love chatting with you, Rob. It's always so much fun, and so that's why I look forward to doing this with you.
I appreciate it, Jack, and the people love it as well. The comment section is always popping up during the Hammerhead Show. We got Charles Thurman, Raphael 5629ers, both sneakerheads here on the channel. Peter Lee, Randall Riley, Jamie Bryan, Dan Rostek. We've got Tom Bragg, Swan Song. Everybody is here and ready and excited. And you did talk about it. I wanted to pick your brain just a little bit about that experience. First and foremost, congratulations on that. I feel like that's a pretty cool milestone to achieve in having your first live radio appearance. That's something that I'm sure you'll remember for some time. And the fact that you were out at the lake, had to step away to do it. Tell us a little bit about that, man. How did that feel, having that first appearance?
It was exciting. I not to make anybody seem old or anything, but like when I was in college, I used to work night shifts, and I basically worked like from 2 to 2, right, in a machine shop. And so I used to listen to, and they'd have Matt Mayoko on KMBR, right? So Matt Mayoko from the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. And so that's really how I found out about the Press Democrat, was through those interviews.
Yeah.
And then one thing led to another, and to hear myself get introduced on the radio, that was just, wild. And I've spoken with Larry Krueger a few times on his channel, which was great because I've listened to him for years on KMBR, and to be able to go on 95.7 The Game with him, and then also talk to Damon Bruce. I've heard Damon Bruce on the radio a lot, and to be able to chat with those two guys was a lot of fun. And they had some fun with my name too as well, which was always a fun time to talk about that too.
It's good to get a little grief back and forth. I am very much looking forward to finding that and giving that a listen. That's fantastic. I was thrilled when I saw that on Twitter. I have wish nothing but the best for you in this venture, and I get excited when someone that I know has a cool experience like that. So I was happy for you to hear that, and thrilled to catch up with you before the show and hear that it did go well and that you enjoyed it. And as I said, I'm sure it is one of those memories that will surely stick with you. But just one of many future radio appearances that are going to be the norm for Jack Hammer going forward.
I hope so. I hope it was good enough that they asked me to come back, as this goes along, and it can become a regular thing, because it's fun. It's one of those things that part of the reason why I do what I do is to talk to people about it. And what we do here has a pretty good following, but it's just so much bigger on the radio.
Yeah, 95.7 The Game might be doing a slightly larger audience than Rob Schuh or Jack Hammer's channel on YouTube. It definitely it's a different market. But our viewers, our listeners are very engaged, Jack. They're very engaged, so that makes up for it, right? We have that interaction with our listeners, our viewers, that they just don't get on 95.7 The Game. Different experience altogether on the radio, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. I don't get nervous when I talk to you. I don't get nervous when I talk to really anybody on here, because I've done YouTube so much. And
right.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. There was definitely some nerves when I first started. First time doing anything for me, I always get a little bit nervous. So, but once the guys started talking, it flowed pretty nice.
I laugh because that sends me back to the first couple of times I did stream on YouTube, and I had spoken in front of large groups of live human beings where there are real faces in the crowd looking at you. And all of a sudden I was in front of a laptop on a virtual call that I had done for work, thousands of times, but I was nervous. I was sweating a little bit. I was like, oh man, I don't know why, but yes, I'm still talking about something I'm comfortable with, but the nerves are going. I can imagine that was the case with this new experience as well. Well, again, congratulations on that. I think it's fantastic that you were on there, and I'm sure that those that have heard it will enjoy listening to you on 95.7 The Game. I wanted to start this thing off by picking your brain a little bit more in talking about specifically your experience last year. This show is all about the training camp. We've got training camp coming up, starts next week. We're excited for it as a fan base because it gives us real stuff to talk about. We're coming out of this dead zone. We're going to get video to watch. It's going to be thrilling. We get to see pads on. Very exciting. I wanted to flash this back to last year. That was your first season covering the team where you were able to step in as a media member. Is that correct?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So what was that like last year? Tell us just a little bit about that experience and walking into camp for the first time. What struck you about that experience?
Yeah, it's wild, man. As a kid, I'd spend training camp at Rockland, right, with my family. We'd go up, my parents and I would take me up there, and we'd watch practice from the other side of the fence. And to go to Santa Clara last year and be able to be inside of the ropes and right on the sidelines, it was a surreal experience. It was a, think of the first day at school, right? If your first day of school in high school, because you haven't been there before.
Right.
But you know about it because your brother went there or something like that, right? And all of a sudden you're walking around and I remember I couldn't figure out how to get into the place. And then I finally did. And I realized I was there too early because I was too excited. I was lucky that Cam Inman was there. He kind of helped me get in the door. And, it was a lot of fun. It was a super, really.
Cam was
really
like that junior or senior that knew you because of your brother and took you under his wing and showed you where everything was around campus, gave you the walkthrough. Yeah,
he was like, here, this is where we go. And he's find a spot. And then he went off and did his own thing. And I just kind of sat there and waited for school to start.
And I'm guessing that it sort of flew by, right? I'm guessing that it was all new. You walked in, and then by the time you blinked, it was over, and you had to look back at what had happened. What did you take away from that first experience, that first year, that might change the way in which you approach covering it? Will you be looking for the same things coming in? Did you learn anything from that first year wherein you'll be looking at specific position groups at specific points throughout training camp?
Well, from the standpoint where I am with YouTube and all that kind of stuff, I will definitely be focusing on different groups each day in terms of for shooting some video, because there's only a small amount of time that you can do that. So, it'll typically be quarterbacks for, as many throws as you can get with them. And then I'll switch over to one of the other groups or something like that. Usually that'll be the pattern. But last year, just things just went so fast. Your first thing is like, well, I'm on the field, I'm doing this, and the next thing you know, practice is over, like you said. So it's a matter of just going out there and, like I noticed that during OTAs and minicamp, I was much more comfortable. It's a lot easier to kind of take a little bit more detailed notes. And I think one of the things that I learned last year was wanting to be a little bit more specific with some of the things that I was looking for in terms of the like the quarterback situation. For example, not just giving. I don't want to go into this year and just tell you that so-and-so was 5 of 10 for, with 2 touchdowns and an interception. I want to give you a lot more context than that this year in terms of the situation that they're working on in that practice. If it's a third down, it's great that he completed a pass on third down, but it didn't get the first down, those kind of things. So.
Right. When you go into a day of practice, do you think to yourself, these are what I'm trying to take away from today? Like night before, do you sit down and come up with a punch list of what position group you're going to be attacking that day, where your focus is going to be?
No, not necessarily. I kind of, you just kind of let it kind of come to you naturally.
Yeah.
I know I like to spend, the way that practice works is they have their individual period, and then they have kind of their competitive piece where the offensive and defensive linemen do one-on-one drills together. And at that time that's happening, the quarterbacks and receivers and defensive backs are working on their one-on-ones. So it's a little bit of having to go back and forth because you can't watch both and get the notes for all of those.
Right.
So I probably spend more time with watching like this year, especially early on, watching the offensive line work against the defensive line because of the changes in that spot. Even though one-on-one drills don't totally simulate what's going to happen when they get into games, because in games you have help from your other offensive linemen and stuff.
Right.
But it gives you a little, I think, a good view of kind of what's happening.
So you may have a general idea of what you want to get covered, but as you get there and arrive at practice, you see how they've laid it out, and that gives you some choices that you have to make. If things are happening simultaneously, one drill's over here that you might want to capture, but there's another drill that you also want to have to capture that you've now got to choose between the two because it's all happening live.
Yeah, and so what I found last year as I went through it was I kind of started to bounce back and forth between the two, not on the same day, obviously, but if I was watching offensive line drills one day, I'd maybe take a look at the one-on-ones the next, because with the rookie the rookie cornerbacks last year, I wanted to make sure that I was giving them some exposure as well, making sure I understood what they were doing.
That makes sense. I've got a couple more follow-up questions, but I got to put in Ryan B's comments here about two goats. I mean, if we were two goats here, let's say we were Joe and Steve, which role would you want to be? Joe Cool in that scenario? I could be either one. I could be cool with being Steve at that point.
Well, I mean, I would like to be Joe Montana's my guy, but in some ways I think I might rather be Steve Young, because I think Steve got that. He's just so intelligent. I'd like to feel that smart for.
I'll take being Joe Cool, Jack. You don't have to tempt me to be Joe Cool. That's for sure. Dan Rostek coming in saying, I remember when a goat used to be a bad thing. It has changed.
At least he didn't put old in front of that, right? Two old goats.
Right. All right. So is there one of the things that popped into my mind? I get starstruck when I think about some of those beat reporters that I've been reading and listening to forever. Is there much of an opportunity for you to rub elbows with some of those veteran beat reporters that have been doing it for a long time? The Matts come to mind, Matt Mayoko, Matt Barrows. Is there any time where you can sort of hang out with them, ask them questions, pick their brains, or is it pretty action-packed and they're doing their own thing?
Yeah, that's one of the things. I mean, when I look back to last year, and I wish that I was more outgoing in terms of introducing myself and those types of things, because there is time, because we all work in the same media room, and depending on when you get there, I mean, you can introduce yourself and chat a little bit and those types of things. So but I'm kind of a quiet guy, and nobody really kind of goes out of their way necessarily to reach out, right? Because you're there to do a job. But right. I would like to be able to. I need to be a little bit more open and going out and introducing myself to them and asking them questions and things like that. One of the things that does take place during during practice, especially when they're doing team, is that we're all kind of on the same side. We're all on the same sideline. Yeah. And sometimes we'll ask each other, "What did you see?" Because sometimes you're not sure what the number was, or did the guy catch it, those kind of things. So sometimes there's some clarifications, but there's definitely rubbing elbows and chatting every once in a while. I would like to do a better job of that with those two, especially.
Yeah, right. I mean, they are fantastic personalities from all outward appearances. I would think in person, it would be great as well. This one, I'm asking you for a little prognostication here. And, I know you don't have any insight, but what does your gut tell you about anticipating whether or not the NFL is ever going to return to open locker rooms?
Well, they've reported that they've announced that the locker rooms will be open this year.
Yes.
I don't expect to. I've never had that experience, but from what I understand, it's not something that's going to be happening during training camp, just because there's so many players. It's more going to be towards the end of training camp, or once they get down to 53 kind of thing.
That's amazing, though.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that opportunity too, because that'll allow. Because right now, the way that it's set up, where they're just bringing the people into you, they control everything, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to really. Because when you're on the field of practice, you can't talk to the players.
Right.
The only chance you have is if if they come to the podium. And so now having that ability to get into the locker room, you can ask questions to anybody that's willing to talk to you.
That's awesome. Yeah, that will allow you to write specialty pieces. Right now, if they don't bring the player that you want to pick their brain up to the podium, and if you don't get your specific question in, you're sort of SOL in that regard. If you can get into the locker room, you can have those more in-depth conversations, begin to build sources and things of that nature. That's very exciting. I'm going to be living vicariously through you, Jack, when you're in the locker room, because that would be a dream to be in there asking players actual questions face to face. All right. So speaking of asking players and coaches questions face to face, you won't be in the locker room for most of training camp, but there will be coaches and players coming up to the podium after the practices, being asked those questions. What are some of the most intriguing storylines, questions, players, coaches that you're excited to be asked at this point?
I think when you get to like the people, I think the first question everybody has to ask is, what are you going to do with Jimmy Garoppolo?
Right.
You need to know what the status is of Jimmy Garoppolo. So that's going to be Kyle Shanahan talking to Trey Lance and asking him, hey, how's your arm feeling?
Right.
And really just kind of leave it at that, right? Because that kind of is a self-explanatory question why you're asking him there. I think that again, this is one of those things where sometimes I have really good questions when I go in. And again, this is an area that I need to get better at, because when you get into the meetings and you're in a press conference, especially in the press room when everybody's talking to the same person, it's rapid fire, right? And it's a matter, and kind of as the new guy last year, I always kind of found myself kind of sitting back, not wanting to step on somebody's toes and those kind of things.
Sure.
And so sometimes I wouldn't even, I wouldn't get to my question because there was just something, I just wasn't jumping in on top of somebody else to cut them off. And I need to do a better job of that too, and feel a little more confident. And that's one of the things I've been really focused on over this offseason.
There's like that sweet spot, right? You got to wait for the player or coach to finish their answer and then jump right in before that next person does, because those beat reporters that have been doing it for a while seem to have that timing down. There is very little dead space for you to jump in and insert that question. And oftentimes you do hear multiple questions being started at the same time, and the more assertive of the two ends up asking the question. I could see why that would feel a little bit awkward, and that you're stepping on people's toes in that regard. That is, you have to tread lightly, I suppose, when you're the new guy.
Well, I don't know if it's even about me being the new guy, because like the first press conference I was in, I made sure that I asked something to Samson Ebicom in that first one, but it's just a matter of like, being confident enough to go ahead and kind of just start speaking up and not letting somebody else cut you off, and being confident enough in your question that you're going to ask and those kind of things. And sometimes the questions, for me at least, like there's some times that I want to ask questions, but it doesn't seem to flow with the conversation that's going. Then I need to do a better job of not worrying about that and just asking the questions that are on my mind.
I think that is the appropriate way to do it, knowing that it is that's the process, that you may step on some toes in doing it, but that it's expected to be so. I'm pretty excited to hear people gushing about Trey Lance. It doesn't matter to me who it is, whether it's fellow players or coaches, position coaches, anyone heaping praise on the young gentleman, because I feel like wowing people in practice is the first step in reconfirming that Trey is that guy when it comes to this year. We started to hear it last year, but with the offseason progression, I'm just hoping to hear it a lot more and start to boost my confidence going in, that everyone's seeing the same thing, everyone's on the same page, everyone's impressed by the leadership. That's just going to build my confidence until I can actually see him in a preseason game.
Yeah, he looked really good throughout the OTAs and minicamp, at least to my eye, and I know a lot of other people wrote the similar types of things. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Trey Lance can put out on the field. I've had some tweets in recent days that people haven't really liked, but it's not even about Trey Lance. It has nothing to do with thinking that Trey Lance isn't going to be the guy. I've said the same thing all offseason, that I believe Trey Lance is the quarterback. I even have him at 13-4 because I think Trey Lance is that good. I just am raising some questions about some other things around that quarterback room that, I think people need to. I think at least it's interesting to me. And if other people don't find it interesting, well, you don't have to find it interesting. I think
I do too.
That's part of why I haven't written an article on it.
It's a conversation that should be had. It's not one that when the topic gets brought up, it should be pushed aside. There is logic to it. There's a debate to be had. I think it's a fascinating dialogue to get in around Jimmy Garoppolo. And I just want to bring in a couple of questions. I saw this one earlier coming in from Jamie Bryant. Now we have to do the hypothetical on this because it does say when Jimmy gets traded, not if. So let's play that hypothetical. We'll say when Jimmy gets traded or released, whatever comes first, and Debo's contract gets done. What do we do for a decent backup quarterback to Trey? How do you see this breaking out? Do you think the 49ers go into the season, if Jimmy Garoppolo is moved, whether it's a release or a trade, he's not on the Niners, do they go into the season with just Trey and Nate Sudfeld as QB1 and QB2?
I don't know anybody else that's really out there right now, right? I mean, is there a name that's out there that you know of that they should be going after? And I'm kind of,
No, as far as I know, the only names I see that make any sense to me are the more creative trades where you have one of these teams that could potentially be interested in Garoppolo sending back a quarterback that would be a step up from Nate Sudfeld in an effort to manage their cap a little bit better so that their quarterback room isn't so expensive. You could put together any number of creative or, tinfoil hat theories around that, but it seems unlikely to me. I see it as potentially Trey and Nate as 1 and 2.
Yeah, if they wanted to trade Jimmy Garoppolo to the Giants for Tyrod Taylor, for example, or something like that. Which
I'd be thrilled with that.
Something like that. But beyond that, I don't know if there's really when you say decent backup for Trey, I don't know if there really is one on the that's out there that can be brought in. I'm Cam Newton, but is Cam Newton really anything at this point?
Right. And does he want a true backup role? I want to put this up because I believe Swansong's doing the good work and is putting the link to Jack's appearance on 95.7 The Game in the comments. It's not going to be in the chat because it filters out links, but he's going to put the link to it in the comment section of this video. So after the video, you want to go check that out. Get into the comment section while you're there. The description has all Jack's info. You can go subscribe to his channel. You can follow him on Twitter. You can go bookmark the Press Democrat page as well. All of those things can be done at the end of the video when you are looking up that link to the 95.7 The Game interview. All right. We had a couple of others coming in that I wanted to throw out. All right, here we go with an interesting one from Andre Moore, sneakerhead here on the channel. Training camp, how does the offensive line pass protection hold up against what Ryans and Kocurek throw at them in this matchup with an incredibly deep offensive line and an incredibly deep defensive line? Who do you expect to see winning more of the battles in camp, whether it's one-on-one battles or whether it is in 7-on-7 or 11-on-11, I should say?
That's one of the fun things about watching this take place, is because I think we all feel pretty strongly about how good this defensive line is, and so the questions are on the offensive line, and so this
right
for a group that you're worried about, to be able to practice against that every day, in practice, I don't think you can really do it any better. Like the old saying goes, iron sharpens iron.
Right.
And so this is, I think, one of the biggest questions going into training camp is how does the offensive line hold up with what the fronters do with Ryans and Kocurek, and that's definitely going to be a key to watch for. And that was one of the things I said earlier today, is I think if you want to get into it, do you want to talk about like position battles right now, or do you want to hold off on that?
No, we'll come back around to the position battles in a little bit, and we will hit up the rookies for a moment. Let's transition into, you're finally going to get to see the rookies in pads out there, a little bit of contact, coming into contact with true NFL vets. Who are you excited to see out there? What are some of the players that you're looking forward to most in the rookies?
Yeah, this is, when you look at, when you start talking about the rookies, it's really kind of all of them, but in particular, it's going to be, I want to see Tyrion Davis-Price, right?
Yes.
I don't feel like I've really seen anything of Tyrion Davis-Price. We saw him in the rookie minicamp practice, and that was pretty much it. I think he might have practiced the first day that we saw for the full team OTAs, but I don't remember that for sure. But we didn't see him. And even when we did, that's not his game. His game is a power runner that's going to run through you and run in between the tackles. And we didn't really get to see a whole lot of that. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Tyrion Davis-Price can do for sure. And then from there, it's guys like Nick Zakelj and Spencer Burford, the rookies. I think those are the guys who, at least in training camp practices, having the pads on will be the, possibly the most difference. I know Kyle Shanahan mentioned this, that, offensive line play doesn't really change when you put the pads on, and there definitely is something to that. But I'm just looking forward to seeing what those two can do. Some of it's going to be more in the preseason games too than training camp.
Absolutely. I had TDP on my list as well, because he is that bowling ball kind of a back where you expect him to run over some people. And until he can run over and through people who are actually attempting to tackle him, you don't have a true sense of what he's actually doing out there. And so I think that it will become apparent whether he's going to be, running through people, breaking tackles, or whether it is a, wait and see type of a thing if he picks up steam as the season rolls on. I'm hoping to see him come out and just be a bowling ball knocking down the pins. That will give me excitement about the pick, make me feel a little bit more comfortable about investing in TDP there in the draft when it felt like we had other needs. You specifically mentioned a couple of the offensive linemen that got drafted. Do you think, in a way too early prediction, you think that they will be in competition for starting spots, or is their most likely landing spot on the roster as backups along the offensive line?
It all depends on what happens at center.
Right.
If Jake Brendel is the guy, and that's the guy they're going to run with him, then I don't think there is a starting spot for any of these guys. Now, if there is a competition and Daniel Brunskill is the guy that starts at center, now it opens up that right guard position. Is it going to be Jalen Moore, or is it going to be, I think, Spencer Burford? Those are the two guys I think that can be competing for that role.
I've got offensive line as one of those positional groups when we get to that topic that I'm absolutely looking for. The other one for me that's fascinating in the rookies is Drake Jackson. I mean, surprise, surprise. I'm interested in our top draft pick, but he is, he also has some things that I feel like will start to show up when there's actual contact out there. To be able to see his get off, his bend, starting to see him winning some of those battles in camp, it's going to give me some hope for what he can do within his rookie season, just how much he'll be able to contribute. And is he developing his hands? Is he working on second moves? Is he becoming more of a tactician? I know it's early on to expect any real growth there, but it will give us the first signs of where he is in his progression and whether we might expect to see him on third down packages or whether he might be buried a little further in the depth chart to start the season.
Yeah, that'll definitely be something to keep an eye on. With him, because he's definitely I think, in my opinion, he needs to take some strides to get himself on the field. I don't think he's at a point right now where he gets on the field very often with everybody else that's along that defensive line. I think he's going to be buried behind guys like Samson Ebukam and Kamoko Turay and so on. So I think he definitely needs to go out and step up.
There is definitely some talent that he's going to be competing with in order to try and get that playing time. It will be fascinating to watch. Thomas Luttrell coming in to share that Danny Gray is the man he's watching. I can't fault him for that. I want to see Danny Gray's wheels. I want to see him toast some people. I want to see those fun, deep shots. I'll talk about Danny a little bit later, but it does trigger for me that I'm excited to see the two undrafted rookie wide receivers as well. I think that sixth wide receiver spot, if the Niners do carry six wide receivers, feels wide open at this point. You could see Malik Turner grabbing it, but if not, one of the undrafted free agent rookies could show us something in preseason. So that's going to be one to watch for me.
Yeah, that'll definitely be a position to check out. Danny Gray, I saw Thomas's comment there, and that's a good one too, just to kind of see if he's still as strong going over the middle as he was without the pads on during rookie mini camp.
It is. Bringing in John B., also known as Strider 3006, and talking about Drake Jackson in response to my wanting to watch him, saying, Rob, put him against Trent Williams as the ultimate litmus test. Yeah, anybody going against Trent Williams, you win a couple of those reps, and man, this future is bright for you. Tom Bragg coming in to say, hey, Kinlaw is going to have a monster year. The man is on a mission of vengeance. I like the sound of that, man. I want to be on a mission of vengeance.
Yeah, that's a guy that they need to have a year from, is Javon Kinlaw, because losing DJ Jones, he played about 51% of the snaps. So it's a matter of, can Kinlaw stay healthy?
Right.
And can he hold up and run in the run defense. I think he's going to be fine as a pass rusher. I think he actually gives them a little bit of a upgrade in that over what they got out of DJ Jones. So, but he needs to stay healthy. And if he can do that, all arrows are up for him. He just needs to stay healthy.
Yeah, should be interesting to watch. He and Hassan Ridgeway do have big shoes to fill because this man and his barbecue sauce used to hold it down, but he's gone now. So we gotta fill that in. It will be a tall task, but I think that they are capable of it. I'm going to make the transition in talking about Hassan Ridgeway, making the transition to talking about the free agents that were acquired and who you might be most excited to see at that point. If you're here in the chat, I do want to say Friday evening, different time than we're usually at. You're enjoying the content, hit the like button to boost the signal to more and more faithful on a Friday evening. Jack, who's the free agent acquisition you're most excited to see? Who is it that's going to make that difference for us, that we're going to see some sparks in preseason?
Yeah, Travaris Ward's the easy one, so I'll skip him. I think you're looking, when it comes to the free agent acquisitions, Ray Mccloud is going to be a fun one to watch because he looked really good. He looked really good during OTAs and minicamp. A lot of balls going his way, making a lot of plays. I'm interested to see if that continues, especially if Deebo Samuel is out there and he's healthy and practicing and participating in full. Is the ball still going to McLeod as much as it was? Because he got the ball quite a bit during training camp.
And in McLeod, you're talking about someone who, the question mark that everyone seems to float is the fumbling issues that have been well noted. You think that's something that will be stressed in a training camp situation against our own defense to where they're hyper aware of that statistic and maybe even coaches are driving home that point in practice, attempting to punch the ball out so that it becomes something that's more conscious for Ray himself in protecting it? Is that something that you would imagine being done in practice, a focus on trying to poke that ball out and thereby helping Ray in essence? Yeah,
it's good. It's good practice for both sides, right? It's good for the defense to get used to trying to knock it out every time they go to make a tackle, and it's good for him to get used to having to make sure he's got it. I think it was 5 points of contact. He makes sure he has that thing in there high and tight, and that they can't knock it out.
Get him to call Tiki Barber. That was a remarkable turnaround in his career. I'm telling you. All right, so the one I'm watching, you mentioned him earlier, Kamoko Turay. I mean, this is an ex-second-round draft pick, drafted 52nd overall, right? Drafted earlier than our own Drake Jackson, who was picked at 61. But the deal is, out of 65 potential regular season games that he could have played in, he only played in 38. And so wasn't able to stay healthy, wasn't able to put it on the field. But the talent is there. So my question becomes, does the change of scenery and hopefully a healthy season this year turn it around? He's a talented player. He's talented enough to be a difference maker. But the wild thing to me, Jack, is this is a guy that feels like he's on our roster bubble, that he could make it and be a 10-sack-a-year guy, or he might not even make the 53. Do you see it that way as well, or do you think Kamoko Turay is more of a lock to make the 53?
I think that Turay should be a lock. I think he, unless the only way that he doesn't make it, I think, is if Drake Jackson absolutely just blows it out of the water. Otherwise, I think Turay makes it as one of the defensive linemen that makes it, because he's explosive. He's done really well in the limited reps and opportunities that he's received during his time with the Colts. I think he showed it during OTA's minicamp. He's extremely explosive off the ball. And I think that he's going to make the roster.
I was showing Ryan B's comment there. He did in the next one correct it. This auto correct got him on Turay. But yes, Turay from Indy was a good pickup. Think I got his name right. Actually didn't. Came back to correct it later. Edge rusher. Yes, I am in agreement. That's the one I have my eyes on because, again, it seems like the talent is absolutely there. All right, we teased it earlier, but I do want to get into the most intriguing positional battles in camp for you, Jack. What are those that initially you're going to have your eyes on most closely?
I think it's offensive line. I think that's the one that's the most intriguing, is because I think it all depends on what happens at center. Because if Randall holds it down at center, all the intrigue to the offensive line kind of goes away a little bit,
right?
Because the rest of it was expected. Like you know that Daniel Brunskill, you know what you're going to get on him at right tackle. I think you all pretty much get an idea what you're going to get on Mike McGlinchey at right tackle. You definitely know what Trent Williams is. And so then it kind of becomes Aaron Banks. But I think, a year ago today, if we were talking about 49ers training camp and we're getting ready for the team for that year, you were thinking that Aaron Banks was going to be competing for a starting job last year. So
right.
When you start to look at the way that this offensive line is, it's really about the center position. Can Brendel hold it down?
It is, and I'm predicting chalk on this one, meaning that all the favorites land their position, all the favorites that are predicted to land their position do actually land their position. So I'm thinking Trent Williams, obviously left tackle, Aaron Banks, left guard, Jake Brendel holding down that center spot. And I agree with you. That's the linchpin that keeps everything else at that chalk point. And then obviously that means that you have Brunskill staying there at right guard and Mike McGlinchey making it back. But if not, there is huge competition potentially breaking out. Who would you see as those competing for center if it's not Brendel? Obviously, I would think that pulls Brunskill over as the most likely candidate. Do you think it's legitimately Brunskill and Donovan West in there at competition if it's not Brendel?
No, I think you've got like Keaton Sutherland, who has NFL experiences in there as well. I think it's
bringing in a vet.
Yeah, when you're looking at the starting role, it's pretty much going to be Brendel or Brunskill or I think Keaton Sutherland. Those are the three guys that have experience of starting in the NFL at that position. And so that's kind of why I say is like, do they drag Brunskill into that competition, or do they just let him sit at right guard? So that's going to be kind of for at least for me, the intriguing piece is, what happens there? Are they rotating those guys in and out?
Right. Do you feel better about adjusting two positions and putting Brunskill in there in the center competition, or holding him down at right guard and simply rotating in the centers? If you do pull Brunskill into the center competition and now you have an open right guard position battle going on, would you see Spencer Burford, Jalen Moore as the most likely to be competing there? What other names would you throw into the mix there for the right guard position if Brunskill is pulled in to the center competition?
You hit it. Those are the two names. It'd be Jalen Moore and Spencer Burford working at that spot, because that's what they worked in practices earlier this offseason.
Yeah, that makes sense. In last question on the line, in the right tackle spot, if you did have a lingering issue for Mike McGlinchey, doesn't sound that way. Sounds as if he's going to be back. He indicated that he feels he's going to be going during training camp, feels he's 100%, not going at 100%, but only because coaches might ramp him up and limit him initially. But if he can't make it back, what would you see as the most likely group to compete for that right tackle spot? I have to assume that 2 years ago, our swing tackle Justin School would be in that competition. Colton McKivitz. You see any other names being thrown in there?
I think you're looking at Justin School, Jalen Moore as your top two. Maybe Colton McKivitz a little bit, but it would start with Jalen Moore or Justin School and then Jalen Moore.
Because Jalen Moore did get a few starts at right tackle last year when McGlinchey was out, right?
Yeah, and he played okay. He wasn't awful. But he also wasn't, he also ended up getting beaten out by the veteran Tom Compton. And so we'll see how that plays out. I mean, I think he's looked better to me, Jalen Moore, that is, he's looked better to me inside than he has outside, at least so far this year.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think that's why this offensive line competition is so fun to watch, is that if it doesn't go down as the chalk lineup where the favorites actually land at their position, there's a ton of competition that could happen. Elvis, a sneakerhead here on the channel, is in agreement with you. Elvis is in the building. I'm with Jack. The O-line will be the thing to watch, and it's key to get this right. So critical to get that right when you've got Trey Lance coming in for his first full season there. That's going to be exciting. Kelch Chronicles coming in here with a question. Is there anyone you see as a sleeper to potentially swoop on a spot? Leon O'Neal Jr., Mason, Martin, Knight, any of those names popping out to you as someone to keep an eye on? We do have a section for an early prediction for camp preseason star. We could just make our transition right into that. Kelch Chronicles is setting us up pretty perfectly for that one. So who do you see as some sleepers? Does Kelch hit on any of those names that you might bandy about here, Jack?
Yeah, it's Jordan Mason. Out of that group, it would be Jordan Mason is the guy that I think is the most likely to be camp star, maybe, jump in on there a little bit too.
That tees me up to just finish the conversation that we were having a moment ago. That's the group that I'm going to be watching in its entirety is running back, because it's fascinating top to bottom. Will it be a bell cow situation more like last year where Elijah Mitchell got the bulk of the carries there? Or is it going to be a two-headed monster where it's TDP and Elijah Mitchell, or a three-headed monster, much more like 2019, where the carries were very similar amongst the top three backs in Breida and Mostert and Tevin Coleman? I tend to think it's going to be a three-headed monster with Elijah Mitchell, TDP, and Trey Sermon, but I'm still fascinated by who will be that fourth running back. Is it Jeff Wilson Jr.? Is it Jordan Mason? I certainly have my eye on Jordan Mason because of you, Jack. I'm going to be keeping a close tab on Jordan Mason for that camp preseason star. I mean, once the pads come on, you'll truly get a better sense of these running backs, right? Up until this point, they're running against air, essentially.
Yeah, they're running against air, but you can kind of see the cutability, the movement and vision and those kind of things. And Mason, he has the explosiveness. He looks like he has really good vision. Definitely can cut on a dime and just get going back to 100 miles an hour as soon as he makes that cut. So that's what I like about him.
Yeah.
He's in a tough spot to make the roster. He's got to knock out, like you said, you've got, Trey Sermon, they use a 3rd round pick for. Are they going to kick him out already this season? I think that'd be tough one for them to do, just kind of based on what the way that they generally go about building their team. They don't usually get rid of guys that early, that quickly. So it's a tough one, but yeah, running back's going to be a lot of fun. You can go through almost every position. Running back's going to be a lot of fun. Wide receiver, you mentioned wide receiver. Who's going to get that 6th spot? Tight end, even, I think, is an interesting one. Who, does Ross Dwelly, is he able to hold on again? Do they, Charlie Warner, does he make the roster, or do they remove him?
Right.
Who's the slot corner going to be? I think that's another one. So, linebackers are pretty much set. Safeties, I think, are pretty much set. But those are some of the other ones to look at.
It's wild for a team that everyone says is this good, myself included, saying how deep this roster is. How many actual battles are in existence and will be fascinating to watch? I'm going to hit up a couple of these super chats coming in. Bro Montana in the house. Cheers, fella. Let's go. Cheers, fellas. Let's go Niners. Cheers, Bro Montana. Brosif.
Bro Montana. I like that one.
Love it. Wanda coming in. Rob, sup, brother? Wanda, good to see you. Absolutely. And she comes back to make sure to include Jack as well. Not left out on that one, Jack. It was a duel. Saying what's up. Moses comes in just to ask, am I going to the Thursday night Seattle game? If that's the one that is in Seattle, yes. I almost never miss that one. It's a quick drive for me. I don't have to take a freaking flight. I will be at that game. Trying to go to a bunch of road games this year. Jaguayo 56, sneakerhead here on the channel with the super chat coming in. Rob, I 1000% agree that the 49ers' success this year will depend on the cohesion of the offensive line. If the O-line can protect and dominate, we can win the Super Bowl. I love the energy coming from Jaguayo 56 here. Do you believe that to be true? I think I've said this, Jack, and I'm not backing down on it. I see this as a top 3 defense. I think we are vastly improved on special teams, and I do not have many doubts about Trey Lance and his ability to have a decent enough season to propel this roster to the playoffs, deep into the playoffs, to a Super Bowl. I do have questions about the O-line. In this scenario, do you believe if the O-line is a dominant O-line that this team is poised to make that kind of a Super Bowl appearance or grab a Super Bowl victory?
Yeah, I think the offensive line is definitely important to that. I think the quarterback position is the most important. Can Trey Lance, because the 49ers have won plenty of games without their top offensive lineman, right? We go back to 2019, 2021, Jimmy Garoppolo's best seasons, the 2 seasons that he was healthy, I should say, but their best seasons of the 49ers were seasons in which they dealt with injuries to their top offensive linemen and still were successful. It just shows you how important that offensive line is, or that quarterback position is. So from a run game standpoint, absolutely with the offensive line, and but it's going to come down to the right arm of Trey Lance.
That's a fair point. That if Trey, I mean, he could make up for a deficient offensive line. And if the offensive line is great and Trey struggles, that still may not be enough. Celts Chronicles coming back to say, hey, if Jordan Mason makes it, perfect. That's my son's name. Mason, his initials are Mac. I need one of the two to make it so you can grab that jersey for him. Hey, that sounds great to me. I'll be rooting for Jordan Mason. I will. Raphael 5629ers, a sneakerhead here on the channel, asked an intriguing one. I mean, I think I know what the answer is here, but it's weird that he's still around. He says, Rob, how surprised will you be if D Ford participates in training camp? How shocked would you be, Jack, if you actually see D Ford out there running around?
I'd be pretty surprised. The 49ers are in kind of a tough situation here with the way that his salary, his contract is and stuff like that. I think he's a guy that spends the season on the PUP list, or I don't really see him participating in training camp. But that's they talked a little bit about that, or Kyle Shanahan did at one point about it's a matter of him deciding what his next move is going to be.
I feel for him because you know how difficult it is to continually fight back, be in rehab, and not be able to do what you love. And it feels like putting him out there on the practice field at this point is insanity, right? It is literally that definition of insanity that people bandy about, where it is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So I would be surprised if that happened. Just a moment for Moses. He's here in Portland in the Southeast area. I'm in Northeast, Moses. At some point in time, maybe we'll get an opportunity to watch a Niner game together. But hopefully I will see you there in Seattle. Appreciate that. All right, we are transitioning here from the preseason stars that may come out there. Oh, I forgot to give mine. Hold on. Before we transition, Jack, here's where I get to talk about Danny Gray and Ray Mccloud. I think it's one of the two speedy wide receivers because I think we should see some plays break down in preseason. That feels like a foregone conclusion. That in combination with Trey's ability to extend plays, get outside the pocket, use his arm strength when it's not fatigued, of course, to chuck the ball down the field to one of the speedsters. It's going to get the faithful hyped up. It's going to be one of those videos that gets played on loop all over the internet. I mean, we saw it last year with Trent Sherfield, who didn't have exceptional wheels. I think when we see Danny Gray or Ray Mccloud with those big completions, it's going to get the fan base going bonkers.
Yeah, it will. It will. Anytime you have those big plays, that's what everybody gravitates towards. And so that'll definitely get people fired up.
It will certainly get me fired up. And really, that's all that matters, Jack. I will then get the rest of the fan base fired up with my enthusiasm. It will be that palpable. All right, now we are doing the transition here. Looking for a surprise prediction for the 53-man roster. Who's someone that's maybe on the bubble, someone who may not even be expected to be on the bubble, but you think has a legitimate chance to make this roster, potentially making a difference in the regular season?
Shoot, this is a tough one because for me to think of somebody who people think of as a surprise. So
right,
just kind of going through the different position groups as I went down my breakdown. I would say maybe Tyler Croft, the tight end, making the roster there because they definitely they brought in a couple of guys. Tyler Croft and Troy Fumagalli were guys they brought in.
Right,
they've been doing this over the last few years, trying to find something different in that tight end room. So. Tyler Croft is a guy who's done it and had been successful in the NFL with as a tight end, and Kittle, Dwelly, and Croft I think just is a little bit better of a group than what they have with Charlie Warner.
I'm secretly pulling for Fumagalli because I know his brother Ross and could probably get him on the program. And so there's a little bit of incentive for that. I cheated on this one, Jack. I think that's a great pick. I was actually just looking at Croft's bio as I went through the 49ers breaking down their free agent acquisitions. And I mean, he's got that kind of a profile picture that it could be me on there, right? It just looks like a pretty average dude. It's spectacular. I always can root for those kind of players because I see myself in them, right? I think of myself as a very average dude in that regard. But I went a different route to make this, interesting and to cheat on my own prediction here. I took an angle of over under 2.5 undrafted free agents making this team because that felt like a pretty remarkable number if you were to take the over. This is a super talented roster, stacked from top to bottom. And yet we did go out and take a pretty spectacular undrafted free agent class. And as I started to roll this over in my mind, it surprised me that so many players, rookies coming out of college, thought they had their best chance to make an NFL roster by landing with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, maybe some of those players think to themselves, this gives me the greatest opportunity to shine on tape. And even though I'm unlikely to make the 49ers roster, I will shine in their system. And then some other team will swoop me up from a waiver claim. But I'm taking the over on this. I'm saying more than 2 of the undrafted free agents between Quantrez Knight, Taysir Mack, Tay Martin, Jordan Mason, Donovan West, and Jason Poe. I'm saying that 3 of those guys make it, and I'm probably crazy for saying so.
Yeah, I think you're crazy. No, I mean, no, that's – I think when you look at the undrafted free agent guys, I think part of it too, with the 49ers spent a lot of money on those guys.
They did.
With guaranteed money and those types of things, because I think they realized that in some ways those guys aren't going to make the roster, and I think some of these guys realize that. And so why would they come to the 49ers unless there was some money behind it?
Right.
And then at the same time, I think the 49ers are looking at those undrafted free agents as those are the guys they're developing. They want to get them in. They want to see what they can do during the season on the practice squad, those kind of things. And then they develop them as, kind of like their secondary draft. And then maybe those guys start to perform in year 2. Because the 49ers, when you look at it right now, they're going to have 45. They have 45 players signed through next year. Some of those guys are there's going to be some openings and position battles next year on this roster for some of these guys. Think of a guy like you mentioned earlier, the safety from Texas A&M, Leon O'Neal Jr.
Right.
I don't know if he's going to make the roster this year, but if Jimmy Ward doesn't come back and he spends the season with the 49ers on the practice squad, develops, gets faster, stronger, understands the system better. Maybe he fights for and gets a position next season because they only, even on that defensive side, there's on that secondary group. I think there's only one guy that's signed for next year. I don't believe George Odom. I think George Odom only signed a 1-year deal. I'd have to go back and double check that. But I think you're looking at Ward and Moore on end of country, end of being free agents next year.
That is a fascinating angle to it, that this is a very deep undrafted free agent class. But if you can manage to stash the vast majority of those players on your practice squad without them getting swept up by other teams through waiver claims, you are in effect developing those players for next season. Because you do make a fantastic point that the number of starting caliber or 53-man roster caliber players currently signed for 2023 is not all that high. I mean, it's sort of a staggering figure, but I do like that my Portland faithful here, Moses, has my back. He says it's not that far-fetched. He's a Quantrez Knight fan, and so that's one already. Just need 2 more. Lee Ving is pointing out West is the only true center of all those guys. John B is like, yeah, Hasty's going to be a camp cut because TDP and Jordan Mason make it. So there we are. Jordan Mason, Donovan West, Quantrez Knight. Boom. I'm done. I win the over. Yeah, I don't think it's happening either. I think I am a bit crazy.
No, I mean, that's the thing, right? That you have there are some really talented players. And the other thing, too, that's funny, it's not funny, that's interesting, is that guys like Moses and John, and they're just, I hear this constantly. Everybody wants to know about these undrafted free agent guys. Like if we were to write a report at the end of practice and we wrote about nothing but the undrafted free agent guys, about what they did, people would love it because they're just so interested in what they're doing.
I'm telling you. That could be an angle. Each practice, maybe just a little bit on each undrafted free agent. You could do a highlight of the undrafted free agents one by one. I would eat that up myself.
Or how about instead of one by one, we put in there, we do a daily undrafted free agent player of the day. How's that?
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. A fun fact of the day on undrafted free agents, whatever it is. If it's information on undrafted free agents, I'm taking it. All right, so let's transition. I just want to get your thoughts quickly on this one. It doesn't feel like a big signing to me, but the Robert Deci signing for what I think is going to be a minimum deal. I don't know if the terms have actually been released yet, but does Robert Deci make the team in your estimation?
And this is a stacked group, right? And
It is.
It was already a pretty full room, and then you have this guy. But Deci hasn't really been a solid player in his career, at least when you look at the numbers and those types of things. I know he was a first-round draft pick, so it's going to be something to keep an eye on. But I think he's a long shot.
It feels like, so he is the guy that, like, he's only 27. He is a 300-pounder or close to it. The Niners don't have very many of those. But to your point, statistically speaking, he has 8 pressures on 125 pass rush attempts, right? Not freaking great. But you have past experience of guys like Arden Key or Kerry Hyder coming in here. This feels a little more of a project, and I would expect him to really have to excel in preseason, in training camp, in game action to make that 53-man roster. It does feel like a stretch to me as well that he makes the team.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, this may aggravate some people because the topic always does, but I want to get your thoughts on Jimmy, Jack. I mean, you can keep him high level. You can dive into, we seem to get conflicting reports from Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter. Just to reiterate those, the one from Rappaport was tweeted out. 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo recently saw Dr. Neil Elatrache for a checkup and is progressing well. SF is thrilled with where he is physically, sources say. The expectation is he'll be fully cleared around mid-August. Perhaps then we'll know his destination. Adam Schefter says, no, I've talked to the team. 49ers officially have given Jimmy Garoppolo's agent, Don Yee and Carter Chow, permission to seek a trade, sources said. Garoppolo has been cleared to start practicing per team source. 49ers still are expected to exercise caution with him this summer. What do you suss out from this new trickle of information coming out that really isn't much new information?
Yeah, I don't really think there's a whole lot new. I think partly what happened was the first report that came out last week from Ian Rappaport came from Jimmy Garoppolo's group, and then the 49ers didn't really like that, so they made it known to Adam Schefter with their piece of it, and I think that's where the back and forth comes from. They're just you're trying to control the narrative and the story that's out there, and when it comes to Garoppolo. Are you asking me if I think he's going to be on the team or what? I mean,
yeah, as it boils down to it, how likely is it, in your opinion, that Jimmy's on the roster in 2022 in any capacity at any salary?
I think it's unlikely, although I think that they should really be thinking about that from a team building standpoint because of the way that quarterback room is right now.
Well, you have stated, and I just don't think that people can really dispute it, is that if you take the money out of it completely, a roster with Trey backed up by Jimmy Garoppolo is a better roster than Trey backed up by Nate Sudfeld. So now that's in a vacuum. Well, great. Decisions can't be made in a vacuum. You do need to bring in to the equation how much money is spent on Jimmy Garoppolo to keep him there as the backup, and how could that money be otherwise spent to make this team into a better unit to support Trey Lance? I mean, it does come down to a risk tolerance equation for me, because really, if you're assuming Trey Lance stays healthy throughout the season, which I think you always want to assume the positive in that, then maybe you say backup quarterback isn't all that important. But last year, the 49ers spent a considerable amount of energy trying to convince us just how important it was to have Trey Lance as our backup quarterback in case Jimmy Garoppolo went down. Do you think it's worth the current money? Is the team that much better with a quality backup quarterback, with a higher caliber backup quarterback? Not to diss Nate Sudfeld too heavily.
Well, I think you hit on it though, right? Is all throughout last offseason, all we kept hearing about was the messaging from the team was you need to have a strong backup quarterback. We've lost seasons because we didn't have a strong backup quarterback, and it's okay if we have Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster and Trey Lance, and now. What you're hearing is everybody saying, you got to get rid of Jimmy. And this isn't from the team, but, you got to get rid of Garoppolo. You got to get rid of Garoppolo. You got to start taking advantage of this and that. You got to do it. It's all the same stuff we heard everybody talking about last year. Right now, their roster is built. They know who's going to be there. Jimmy Garoppolo's salary is still there. Would it be nice to roll over that cash? Absolutely. Would it be nice to use a little bit of that, maybe to sign a guy here if you need to during the season to bolster something? Sure.
Right.
Even if you can't do that, there are ways that they can go into next off season having kept Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster and still get to about $60 million in salary cap space by just redoing some contracts that, there's like they did this season. They could redo 3 contracts and get open and free up about another $30 million of salary cap. So are they going to live by the message that they sent last year, or are they going to change it? And, and people have said this. I've seen this a number of times to my comments on Twitter. Why are we so talking about the quarterback position, the backup quarterback position? Well, because the 49ers have lost 2 seasons in the last 4 years to the backup quarterback spot. And quite frankly, last year, if Trey Lance wasn't the starter, the backup, the 49ers might not have made the playoffs.
Right.
Because they might not have beat Houston in week 17 without a solid backup quarterback. Even the game against Arizona that they lost, it wasn't because Trey Lance didn't perform. It was because there's other players around him that were really struggling in that game.
And when you look at who's ultimately in charge of roster construction, John Lynch, he could certainly be looking at this from a standpoint of, we have had good season followed by struggle since we started this regime. If that happens again, there's very likely to be someone's head on a platter served up to Jed York as, the person who's responsible for it. And so I could see him exploring the idea of keeping Jimmy Garoppolo around. I do think in the equation I mentioned, you do have to bring in John B's point here, Strider3006, saying even if the team would be more talented with Jimmy as a backup, it's not worth the potential locker room division having him around and what it could cause. I don't know that that's a foregone conclusion that it's not worth it, but what I will say is you do have to take it into account in my mind. If you are John Lynch, if you are Kyle Shanahan, you have a much clearer understanding of just how detrimental having Jimmy back in the locker room would be. I think it has to be factored in, but I don't know that it's an absolute no, Jimmy has to go because of the potential locker room strife. It might be manageable with both of those 2 personalities. If you're talking about people that are affable to it, like Jimmy and Trey have 2 of the more likable personalities I've seen on NFL quarterbacks. If anyone could do it, I would think the 2 of them could continue to be in harmony.
Yeah, this is something this is the other argument that keeps coming up. And this was, again, the argument last year. We just got through a season in which they dealt with this. They were 3-5 at one point, and everybody throughout that first half of the season was calling for Trey Lance. The quarterback never made the head coach never made the move. He stuck with who he had decided was going to be the quarterback. The only time Lance played was when Garoppolo couldn't. And I just see this as again, if you have the right leadership at the head coaching position, you can work your way through it. When we've talked in the past about, like, for example, George Seifert, right? I don't necessarily put him up there really high in terms of the coaches in San Francisco history that I've seen. But one of the things I will say about him is he handled the quarterback position absolutely perfectly once he took the job in '89. He cut out all the BS about there being a quarterback controversy. He said, Joe Montana is my guy. And then when Joe Montana couldn't play, Steve Young is my guy. And it was cut and dry, and it allows the team to follow one guy. And then at that point, it's up to the quarterback to win games and get everybody on their back. Because if you win games, they're going to follow you.
That's right. That's the ultimate proving ground is winning. And it was decisive by Seifert to operate in that way. And I do appreciate that decisiveness. I want to close out with a 60-second quick question for you. But before I do, Josh Cook, one of the newest sneakerheads here on the channel, coming in to say kind things, has to be put on the screen. Rob Schuh, Jack Hammer are my favorite tandem of 49ers content creators. Thanks for everything you guys do. Thank you for that, Josh. I always appreciate kind words for myself and especially for Jack as well. I'm a big Jack Hammer fan. All right, so I want to close on this one because it gives us a chance to disparage someone in our division here. But Kyler Murray's new deal here, Jack. What are your thoughts on it? Does it hamstring Arizona? Are they going to win while he's there? Do they take advantage of the cheap early years? Like this year and next year are real cheap against the cap, and then it's up in the $40 million range from there on out. What do you make of the new deal?
It's a great deal for Kyler Murray and the 49ers.
Yes.
That's the way that give him the money, give him all the money, give him the bag.
Man, his money.
He's 2-3 against the 49ers in 3 seasons with the Cardinals. Yeah. Keep them there. The 49ers have a really good plan when they play against them. That's partly why they held them to only 17 points that first time around. Kyler Murray's a really good quarterback. He's also really short. And if you rush him and you don't allow him to step up through the line and you kind of keep your defensive lineman in front of him, it makes it really hard for him. And the 49ers did a really good job of that last year. And did it really good in 19 and 20 as well.
It is nice to have a monster like Eric Armstead with his length and height in the middle of the line there against such a minute quarterback, if you will. I was excited about it too. Pay that man. Keep him there in Arizona. Tie yourself to that young gentleman. I hope those words don't come back to bite me. As always, before we close out, if you enjoy the video, hit the like button. Consider subscribing to the channel. And as I said before, Swan Song put the link to Jack's 95.7 The Game interview in the comments section for the video. You can go find that. And while you're doing that, in the description of the video, you will find all of Jack Hammer's links. You can follow him on Twitter, subscribe to his YouTube channel where you could see me on Monday nights, and bookmark, most importantly, that Press Democrat page where Jack is putting out fantastic content on the regular. Great for a dialogue there at the Press Democrat. I mean, as always, Jack, I always enjoy our time together, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rob. It's always a lot of fun, and have a great weekend. I look forward to talking to you again on Monday.
Absolutely. So do I. After our Monday conversation, that's it. It's frickin' training camp after that. Pretty excited about it. Thank you all that are here in the chat. Raphael5629 says it very well all the time. Have a great weekend, everyone. And sneakerheads, thank you all for being here. I hope that you all have a wonderful weekend. And until next time, I'll be back on Monday with Jack on his channel. Follow me on Twitter if you want to see if I'm putting out a show on my channel before the start of training camp. Until then, cheers, faithful.